And next, I'm going to pass the mic over to my friend and colleague, Richard Connect. And he's going to talk to us today about system of care work and alignment in the teaming and assessment process.
Emma, thanks, and happy Thursday morning. So happy to be in conversation with you all and to be in partnership with April and our state partners and our UC Davis partners in what, for me, is one of the most energizing conversations of the last decade in California when it comes to child and family services. We are finally at this point when the contextual work of interagency integration system of care under 2083 and the system of care work that happened under KDA and CCR has built to this moment, this very moment in our developmental time together, that we are ready to implement with fidelity the evidence-based tools into an environment of healing, child and family teaming. It's so exciting for me. So really happy to be with you. Mindful also, as we advance to the next slide, please, that you all are holding tremendous obligation and responsibility now. And if you're in, whether you're in child welfare or behavioral health, probation, or one of the other partners aspects of the system of care, we're all holding tremendous reform obligations and opportunities. And so just please know that I have just deep appreciation for the heaviness of that work, the difficulty of that work. We saw that reflected in the Menti polling that Emma just led for us. Just know that we get how heavy it is, and we also get that it's worth it. And we're going to talk a little bit about why it's worth it. So in the next few minutes, we want to explore a little bit about how and why the System of Care Memorandum of Understanding under AB 2083 is critical to your eventual success as implementers of CANS and teaming. There's a strategic intentionality to the System of Care MOU that supports our CANS work, and we're going to talk about that. We want to also spend some time after I've kind of set the stage, so to speak, with that, to understand how the rates reform work and other aspects of child welfare and behavioral health services reform can be enhanced by the system of care work that either you or some of your bosses are doing in local communities. Next slide. By way of quick context, really important to understand that all system of care work shares a common mission: to keep children and youth at home, in school, safe, and in community, out of trouble, right? Teaming and assessment are universally practiced by all system of care partners, including schools and regional centers and their vendors. We don't always call it child and family teaming, but the teaming process, which is universally intended on healing in community and context of the family's needs and experiences, is fundamental to all parts of our system. So while we're focused on the use of CANS and CFT within a welfare probation environment, the constructs we're talking about and the MOU under 2083 are intentionally and potentially applicable across the healing spectrum, if you will. And here's what is super exciting, is that the CANS, the IP CANS in California, provides this extraordinary potential to realize this uniformity of care and service delivery that gets us to this point of being authentically, genuinely whole child ready, whole person ready, right? We've given lip service to this construct for decades in healthcare, both public and private systems. It's not a condemnation of public services, because private healthcare has always used this word and not done the heavy lifting of integration. So by way of context, this is why this is exciting, is we are at the point when we can translate all of this into a fidelity-based practice going forward. It's whole child work, finally. All right, some additional context, a little more on the practical clinical side, and I shared this with great sensitivity that we have grown up largely in California and across the country in an environment where teaming has taken on additional expectations beyond simply being a place where people hold one another's trauma and acknowledge that people have been harmed and are suffering, right? And so there's this universal and primary purpose in assessment in all clinical settings, that assessment is about understanding. And we sometimes get stuck in the use of a tool, or the forms in use, or the way we do the work, that takes away from this fundamental imperative of recognition that assessment means understanding. I sometimes have thought to myself, if we could replace the word assessment with the word understanding, we might be able to better engage kids and families. The IP CANS is a unique tool to support that understanding process, and it's been a few years since the state got into alignment on this at the departmental level in Sacramento. But let's pause a moment and just reflect on just that step alone of just identifying that we are going to use one tool and make a commitment to that. And we're now 5-6 years beyond that. And again, that's what's exciting about the moment. Absent an authentic understanding of the child and family's experience via assessment, the entire engagement and healing process will be ineffective. You know this if you've studied ICPM or the related constructs in wraparound, right? Like if we have engagement, everything else in the treatment works. If we don't have engagement, we struggle to do everything else in the treatment episode. Engagement is first for a reason. So these are all super important contextual items as we talk about then how do we put CANS and teaming into high fidelity practice. Next slide. So orienting quickly, acknowledging that many of you may not be super familiar with the Assembly Bill 2083 and the Memorandum of Understanding that supports the system of care build in California. There are evidence-based, evidence-informed functional aspects to what organizations do together that are captured within that MOU. This is all by design. There are 11 of them. We've highlighted 7 of them here. 4 of them in this beautiful, I don't know, was that violet colored, and then 3 of them in blue. And we're going to talk a little bit more in detail in just a second about what these 7 elements in particular have to do with your successful fidelity to CANS and teaming. So just pausing here again to reflect that your managers, your deputies, your directors, not just in welfare, but their partners, have crafted an MOU that is intentionally set to bring us into this place where these 7 elements in particular, if done with any kind of sustainable consistency, will create the conditions for successful implementation of CANS across the spectrum, right? And so let's dig into a few of these. Thank you very much for the slide help. So there are 4 elements within Assembly Bill 2083 MOU that by design support the practical delivery of assessment, engagement, teaming, service delivery, transition, care coordination, all those functions, right? And those are, and again, acknowledging that in your local MOU, the numbering, the sequencing of these might be different, and the nomenclature might be slightly different. So the nomenclature we're using today, screening, assessment, and entry to care, child and family teaming, that's what we call it at the state level, right? But again, your local nomenclature might be slightly different, but you have a function in your MOU that captures that and everything else we're going to talk about in the next couple of minutes. So elements 4 and 5, again, they might be somewhere else in your MOU, but they invite you and your bosses, right, to make a set of commitments to how are we going to help and support families to be screened, identify and understand their needs, enter care, like what's the no wrong door methodology like in our county, right? And then once they're in the door, how do we team with them? The element 6 in the MOU suggests that interagency placement committee, which is nothing more than an enhanced teaming process, right? And it's used in various ways, shapes, and forms in our counties, but it's just a teaming process at a higher level for kids with complexity who have needs that the team maybe has not been able to address, right? How do we develop resources to meet those complex needs? That too is in the MOU by design. And that IPC process has to be informed and connected to the CANS information, right? That's why it's in the MOU. Element 7, the alignment and care coordination, suggests that when we do appropriate screening, assessment, teaming, when we do IPC work, all of that is designed to help us on an interagency basis align and coordinate the care so that there can be one team, one assessment, one plan, whole child, singular aligned work, right? So 3 of these 5 system of care partners currently use the CAN. So of the 5 signatories that are obligated under AB 2083, child welfare and behavioral health now, with real clarity, have to use the IP CANs. And and applied to some of our foster youth in probation, right? Their obligation begins, I think, January of next year for probation to begin using CANs. So we have, again, 3 of 5 partners who are now in California wonderfully. It's difficult work we're talking about, but wonderfully, we're in a place now where the vast majority of the kids who are the subject of the system of care are going to have the same tool in place to help us understand their needs. So when they pop around the system, there's a common methodology, understanding, and a set of agreed to ideas about what are the strengths, what are the needs of this particular kid in the context of their own experience. So this is amazing work in California. Some of you, if you're gray-bearded like me, you would have never guessed 15 years ago that we would have gotten to this place in California. It's really quite amazing. Next slide. So 4 elements at the practice level, 3 elements at kind of the functional level, right? So we're coming up to address what do organizations need to do so that the practice elements of the MOU can be effective. Element 3, how do organizations share data? How do we mitigate the privacy, the HIPAA and the FERPA, right? How do we make data available so that we understand whether the system is working? Really difficult work, but the purpose of the MOU under 2083 is for partners to help each other figure that out so that you can share CANs information in a timely, fluid, dynamic way, right? If you don't address the systemic problem, then all of the intentionality for one CANs won't work. You see the connection between the systemic elements that are in the MOU, they're in there for a reason so that the practice elements can function. Information and data is one. The way we recruit, support, coach, train staff is another one. We have to make sure we're training people to not just IP CANs use in a collective singular environment in each county, but things like motivational interviewing, things like integrated core practice model use, like all of these things can be co-trained to and should be co-trained to so that you get the alignment, so that we're out of our silos and we don't have different perspectives about what does that mean to use a CANs, right? Element number 9 is the revenue sharing and maximization, because all of the obligations that come with healing, being a healer in California, take time and money, right? And if the organizations aren't tuned into that, then when those money problems arise, which they inevitably do, we're in one of those cycles right now, right? Then how does the system hold itself together so that the teaming can be coherent, sustainable going forward? All right, so thank you. Elements 3, 8, and 9 are in your MOU to support the system. The other ones are there to support the teaming. All right, orienting you a little bit deeper, really quickly, to Assembly Bill 2083 and the MOU, a couple of quotations lifted from the state's guidance, okay? So the purpose, and this just to reinforce what we've been talking about, the purpose of the MOU is to create and ensure a system where partners and the partners' programs and policies reflect high coordination, integration, effective delivery of services for kids and families that are the focus of care, right? And to address the systemic barriers. This is important language. The AB 2083 MOU was written. The system of care was implemented back in 2018 to let us address the systemic barriers to the traditional provision of services. Those barriers are what create gaps through which families fall, right? And then we wonder, like, what happened? Like, how come we put so many resources in California, so much money into the system, and we don't get systemic improvement? It's because the wholeness of the system doesn't hold the implementation work collectively. And so it's not maximized, it's fragmented, and it's siloized, right? So we're creating a oneness to the system so that a wholeness to the system so that whole person care, whole child care can be effectively delivered. There's great intentionality again to the MOU work. Next slide. It matters because in high functioning, mature systems of care, there are demonstrable outcomes that are all the outgrowth of good teaming, right? And so the good teaming, which is dependent upon not just teaming behavior, but systemic organizational interagency behavior and the vision to hold ourselves in wholeness and oneness, yields lots of great outcomes, including these and probably 3 dozen others. This is an abbreviated list, comes to us from our good friends at Georgetown University Technical Assistance Center many years ago. And again, there are demonstrable outcomes that come, this is important, not just from more money to do more teaming or more CANS use. These outcomes that you're looking at on the screen actually came from systems where they didn't necessarily implement further programs and services. They didn't build more programs. They simply got in the sandbox together to coordinate the services they did have. So the outcomes we're after come from high levels of coordination and system integration, not necessarily building new programs or implementing new services. This is important realization in California, where we have historically said to ourselves, oh, we have a problem over here, let's throw some money at that problem and we'll fix it. And it's not that easy. And we've often not maximized our experiences because we haven't done the heavy work of integration. All right, next slide. A little bit wonky here, but further understanding about the system of care invites us to some realization that as implementers of IP CANs and teaming, it's important to understand this, that in every one of your counties, you have an interagency leadership team. Now, in some counties, they're functioning pretty well. They meet every month. They have dynamic conversations. They're talking about the stuff they should be talking about, and great empathy that in some of your counties, you may be implementing IP CANs and CFT where the ILT is not functioning very well. All right, let's just acknowledge and name that. And so you're going to have some additional work to do to kind of manage up potentially, to try to encourage your senior managers, your executives to say, hey, can we get together? Can you all get together and figure out what does that MOU mean in our county? And can we talk about how do we do teaming? How do we do assessment? How do kids enter care? How do we coordinate, right? All of those things. And in most counties within that interagency leadership structure, there's a second level. It's sometimes called an executive advisory committee, might be called a children's interagency advisory committee. There's no particular terminology to it, but that's the senior managers, the deputies, sometimes senior supervisors who are charged with kind of executing the vision of the ILT. And then this graphic in particular calls out the intentionality of implementation of all of the reform work. So we could add, for instance, in one of these colored modules at the bottom of this box, IP CANs implementation, right? So in many of your communities, you're working on things like BH Connect, high fidelity wraparound, brand new, right? Implementation of community schools in some school environments. There's CalAIM. Like the system of care has room for and should be the conduit to implementation of all things, including IP CANs, all right? So in your mind, imagine that, add another nodule on this, another arrow that says that interagency leadership team should also be concerning itself with how faithful we are to CANs utility and to teaming effectiveness, all right? And then over on the left-hand slide, give me one more second on that slide, thank you. Over on the left-hand slide, you see the element, the reference to creating hospitable conditions. The role of the interagency leadership team, your bosses, is to create the conditions that make it possible for teaming to work and for CANs to be universal and singular. We have to pay attention to, again, the things in the MOU. How do we share money? How do we share information? How do we team? How do we train? Do we co-locate? Those kind of things. All right, next slide. Thank you. All right, just to drive home the wonder of this moment, the beauty of this moment that we have collectively kind of rode to for many years now, all of us and many others, those who came before us. We're at a place where we have in California an independent practice, an integrated practice CANs, IP CANs, and 3 of the 5 partners are obligated to that use now. And by contract extension, our community providers should also be obligated to that singular use of IP CANs. And if not, that's a developmental step for you to take, right? Like making sure your contractors are using IP CANs and that they can help you solve the information sharing. And so the CANs now is fulfilling its mission for which it was dreamed of, 35 years ago, right? Like it's the center of the system. It aligns us around a common understanding about strengths and needs for every particular kid. So we're in this place where the coherence of the system is going to come together around the CANs. This is amazing, amazing work. Super, super excited about it. Next slide. All right. The benefits, in addition to some of the ones we already talked about, is that on the system level, we're going to create additional impact that is going to sustain us going forward into future generations of healers in California. We're going to establish a culture of trust at a much deeper level. It's going to, in other words, it's going to enhance practice, right? We're going to create clarity for kids and families, because you all know 35% of our kids in child welfare are in somebody else's county at some point in the care episode. And some of that's intentional and necessary, right? But when kids move from county to county, having one CANS might be really powerful, right? It's going to inform the integrated planning process in ways that we've not heretofore seen. If we do all those things, we're going to get reduced stress on caregivers. So everybody associated with the care team will experience reduction in stress. And I'll just point out for a second here, it's not just reduced caregiver stress, it's reduced stress on us as professionals. And if we get reduced stress as professionals because we get better alignment, our job satisfaction goes up, our burnout goes down, we get better healers, right? And the workforce gets sustained. So there's this double win in a high fidelity CANS practice. Ultimately, we're going to build on experience and create a culture across the state of California that says, this is how we do our work. We understand wholeness for kids and families, and the CANS and teaming is our tool. Next slide. Really quickly here, Robin's going to share, and our CDSS folks are going to share a little bit later, greater details here. But one of the things that's super exciting, and we want to celebrate the Department of Social Services and their partners at DHCS and other places around development of some tools to support this. So we're unlike back when I had hair, the state often said, hey, counties, you guys do this thing. Good luck with that. Here's the policy guidance. Tell us how you're doing later on, right? Not anymore. Like CDSS has for years leaned in, understood that we have a technical assistance role. And the fact that we're gathered here today with 175 people to talk about how the state's going to support this is amazing. And these are the tools, and Robin's going to tell you more about them later on. But just pointing out that there are amazing resources that have been developed over the last decade. That pioneering work is rolling into these tools, which are going to support fidelity in ways that we haven't seen before. Next slide. So wrapping up then, and with great appreciation for your time and energy with me this morning, some recommendations for you to think about. All right. So no particular order or importance to these, but some of the things I would recommend if I were in county land working and coaching on some of this stuff, I would encourage you to use your interagency leadership team to establish a cross-agency work group, behavioral health, probation, welfare at the least, right? And maybe in some counties, even schools, because some of your contracted partners are also in school environments where they should be using CANS, or they might even be already, right? So think about, do our school partners in our county need to be involved in this conversation? Form a work group associated with your CPIP work that we're going to talk about later, right? And bring them into an alignment around how are we going to do this one system, one policy in our system, right? And to that end, inquire with your county education and your local education authority folks if they or their contractors are using CANS. You want to do some inquiry. It might take you a minute. Here's the thing. In a big county, if you're in a larger county, you might get different answers because the LEAs are independent. The school districts are independent. And sometimes the county office of education doesn't know, and they won't know, right? Like, where is CANS being used? And so they'll come to you and they'll say, we're not using CANS. There might be some school districts where they are using CANS, right? So be patient as you conduct that inquiry, but the more you can invest in that process, you're going to position yourself as a county for sustained fidelity to practice because you're going to know where the broader environment of CANS is occurring, right? I would encourage that work group to come back to the ILT probably twice a year, maybe even quarterly, and say, this is how we're doing. This is what our CPIP process is like. This is what our fidelity work looks like. We just want you to know as big bosses, this is what we're doing. Really importantly, please don't create separate policies within probation, behavioral health, and welfare for how we use one CANS. Don't do that. Make a commitment right now that we're going to do one policy and we're going to share it across the system. That's the way you sustain the structural aspect of the wholeness, right? Otherwise, you've got 3 policies. They're all subject to drift. And then 3 years from now, other people are going to inherit the work and they're going to wonder, what does that mean? We got 3 different policies going on, right? Identify ways that leadership can support staff in doing their work. So manage up. We've already talked a little bit about that. And finally, 2 more things. I would encourage our supervisory personnel to understand their key coaching roles. So training to integrated core practice, training to IPCANs, training to teaming is one thing. If our supervisory personnel are not focused in their one-to-one supervisory sessions on the effective practices, then we're missing that key component of practice change, right? So bring your supervisors into alignment around the critical role they have, and then ultimately recognize also that the integrated core practice model is the system of care's practice model, and that there's a critical link here to understanding the power of empathy and empowerment as the change process. Remember, in other words, child and family teaming and CANS use are not technical functions. They are healing human functions. And if we can remind ourselves continually, which is what ICPM tries to do, that we are engaged in the process of healing. We're not here to complete forms or to finish CANS tools. We're here to use those tools to heal people. We've got to have that front and center. Then we'll get to success ultimately with the faithful practice here. So I think maybe one more slide in transition. There's more information out there. You can find it at these two sites. And again, tremendous resources in the environment, and deep appreciation again for the work you're doing. And I'm going to yield back to Emma.